Welcome to Unscripted, a podcast with no script by design. We're not following a plan, and that's exactly the point. This show is about whatever's on the minds of your hosts, Larry Lannan and Duncan Giles. We'll dig into what's happening in the world, and just as importantly, what isn't making headlines this week. So, with that, let's get started. The conversation could go anywhere because we go wherever the microphones take us. Here's Larry Lannan and Duncan Giles. I'm Lannan, he's Giles. This is Lannan and Giles Unscripted for Friday, September 26th, 2025. Duncan Giles, welcome back.
Thanks, Larry. It's always good to be here.
And Duncan and I are very happy to have a guest on this program, somebody I've known for many years. We were co-workers at WCSI Radio in Columbus, Indiana. We've both done an awful lot since then, but I want to welcome Scott McKain, well-known public speaker and author. Great to have you as a guest on the podcast, Scott.
Larry, I'm honored you'd ask, and Duncan, it's good to meet you for the first time, but as a former longtime resident of Fishers as well, Larry, you've kept me posted on the latest and greatest in Fishers for a long time. So it's great to be with you.
Well, it's always good to be with you. And I wanted to bring you on, not just because we've been friends for a long number of years, because you have made a name for yourself in your post-media career. And what you have done is you've been an author and a public speaker. And your distinction, if it can put it, I guess a word you like to use, you talk about customer service. You just talk about having an outstanding or above average. You talk about the word distinction when you talk about that. And you write books and you speak to corporate events, preaching that gospel. So I guess the first thing I will ask you is when you talk to these people, these high executives and leaders of industry in America, when you say you want them to have customer distinction rather than just customer service, I mean, why do you use that word, and why do you believe that there are companies out there that need to make that their goal in life?
Well, that's a great question, and it requires a two-part answer. First off, the word distinction struck me several years ago as being the way that I wanted to go because I heard so many people talking about differentiation. You had to differentiate yourself in the marketplace, and the thing that occurred to me is if I slap every customer in the face, I am different. I've created differentiation. And so a lot of organizations were seeking differentiation without worrying about what really had traction and impact on customers. And that's why I started using the word distinction, because to me it signified something different, something more unique than just being different, right? It being different. If the manager comes up to me after a meal in Fishers and says, how did you enjoy your meal? And I say, man, it was really different. That's not a compliment. That's not a compliment. But distinction to me seems to be a higher level. So why is that important? And one of the things I try to say to everybody, whether it's a Fortune 500 CEO or somebody working frontline, is that we all operate in a highly competitive world. And everything that we want in life currently is owned by somebody else, right? I mean, if we want customers to spend money with us, they have that money. We have to do something distinctive enough to receive it. If we want a promotion in our job, we're not the only one asking for that. There's competition everywhere. So what we tend to find is that whether it's for a promotion or whether it's to get hired or whether it is as a customer choosing where they want to do business, we look for uniqueness. We look for something that separates us. Because if the customer can't find anything that separates your business from another business, then we choose on price. And from a business perspective, that's the worst place to be. That's a race to the bottom. So we have to find those things that separate us from competitors.
Scott, before I turn it over to Duncan for a question, I'm going to ask you this because when you write your books, you often use examples of what you recall from your childhood, and you grew up in that little town, Crothersville, Indiana, down south of Columbus. And you talk about the restaurants, the shopkeepers, and you
Oh, gosh, I
chose,
appreciate that.
and,
Yeah.
and tell me why you chose to do that to make this bigger point to businesses much bigger than that.
Well, there are two reasons, Larry. One is, I'm proud of where I come from. I'm my mom and dad owned a little grocery store in Crothersville that all of a sudden faced competition with what seemed to us to be a supermarket. A big IGA store moved in, and we ended up winning that battle. And how does the mom and pop compete against a bigger rival? And I joke. It's nothing unique to me. It's amazing how much smarter your parents become the older you are. So some of the things that I saw my dad doing in terms of how we would take care of customers. We delivered groceries before anybody ever thought of Instacart. We extended credit to folks that needed it in our community. Um, all the things that would create an emotional connection with our store. The bigger store was always going to beat us on a price of a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk. So we had to find something else that we could do that would earn that additional investment by the people of our community. And I just learned so much from that. And I think that's one of the challenges that bigger businesses face is they've gotten away from some of those basics about taking care of your employees. I, I'm off on a tangent. I apologize, but I mean, it astounds me how many companies that I have encountered that think they can treat their employees badly, but those employees will still treat their customers wonderfully, and it's just incongruent. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. We have to take care of our internal customers as well as our external customers. So that's one of the things I saw in my hometown, and it's one of the messages that I'm privileged to get a chance to talk to a lot of companies about.
Yeah, Duncan and I both worked in government where they tried to do customer service. I was even a manager for a while in that area. But the thing is, every now and then you'd get a management group that would say the beatings will stop when morale improves, and that's where you get into
Love
a big problem. Duncan, I'm going to let you have the next question for Scott.
Yeah, well, first off, I just want to say for those of you who are watching on video, um, okay, Scott, you worked with Larry about 3 decades ago.
Yep.
Were you a child when you started? Just curious. Um,
You're very kind, Duncan, and that is not your reputation. No, wait. No, I appreciate that.
no,
Thanks.
seriously, my one of my things that and this dovetails to what you just said and what Larry was talking about was, you want to give companies want to give exceptional service. It seems though nowadays, especially more and more, I see it in the government a lot, but also in the private sector as well, that individuals on the front lines, be they frontline employees or frontline managers, are being asked to do more and more and more with less and less burnout, things of that nature. And it's just tougher for them, I think. And I would love to hear your opinion on giving that great service because they're so disheartened or burned out. What have you found or in your studies and things of that nature?
Duncan, you've absolutely nailed it. I mean, that is absolutely what's happening out there. And one of the ways that my career in business has evolved a bit is, I give a speech and then maybe the CEO asks for consulting or business advising or coaching. So you get some one-on-one. And one of the things I've asked a lot of CEOs is, okay, so you stood up in front of your group and you said, people are our most important asset. How come you're treating them like an expense? Right? I mean, an asset is something that you nurture and you help to grow. And we also had a little farm just north of Crothersville. What will we do with our crops? Well, you fertilize them, you help them to grow, you do the things that would, but yet I see so many organizations that they give lip service to their frontline people, but yet they don't give them the tools that it takes to do the job that they want them to do. The biggest gap in business is the gap between what the C-suite wants to have as the customer experience and what the front line is delivering because of the lack of resources between those two.
The ivory tower.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. And a television show I want to throw my shoe at the television every time I see it is the Undercover Boss because it's the same format. This boss then puts on a disguise and goes out and all of a sudden discovers how the frontline people aren't getting the support they need. So they give away money and they promise to change their lives. Well, why didn't the guy have his tail out in the field knowing what his people were doing to begin with? They're celebrating this guy has this epiphany, or this gal discovers the future of the business. Why weren't they doing that in the first place? I'd be embarrassed to be on Undercover Boss, to expose to the world how little I knew about what was going on in the front line. So, that's the problem. That's the issue. I think you've absolutely nailed it. And I've got a new book coming out in February, and one of the lines in the book is too many leaders think AI is going to be corporate Manjaro. Give us a little shot of AI, and we're going to reduce the number of people that we
That's
have, and we're
awesome.
going to get rid of all these folks. We're going to shrink, but man, we're going to be, and there's just going to be a bigger disconnection. The smart leaders and the smart businesses I see are using AI to handle the repetitive tasks to give their current people more time to get closer to customers and handle those issues that we need that human touch. It's not to fire everybody and get rid of everybody. And I think we're going to.
Okay, I think we just Scott has just frozen on us. You still there, Duncan? Duncan is frozen on us as well. Okay.
But Larry, you are. There you go.
Yep.
Now you're
Yep.
back.
Okay, we had I don't know if it was on, I think it was on my end. I have this very reliable normally internet service, but every now and then we have a hiccup. So
Well, it could be me because I was on a Zoom call yesterday and froze. So
okay, well just
and
we
when you're
lost
talking about doing a virtual program, that was not exactly my best sales
Yeah.
call.
well, I didn't
Again,
have as much.
folks, this is how the sausage gets made. This is what happens during these types of podcasts. Ta-da! Let's put on a show. Sometimes this kind of thing happens, but we
Yeah.
roll on.
Well, Scott, I couldn't fly you in from Las Vegas, so that's the best I could do. I'm sorry.
Well, and right now I'm in beautiful Fort Wayne, so
Oh, you're in
it's,
Fort Wayne now.
Whoa.
Excellent. Okay, good for you.
so
Well, anyway, you were. I just want you to finish up. You have a new book coming out. I was going to mention this earlier, so you already talked about that, and you talked there about AI. It was a question I was going to
yeah,
ask you anyway. So let's develop that a little bit because I was just talking to an English teacher the other day at Hamel Southeastern High School,
yeah,
and he said, we can't ignore AI. I mean, we
right,
say, okay, here's a paper you write. Don't use any AI at all. This one, okay, if you could use AI as a tool, and this one, go ahead and just prompt the AI and come up with something. I think what they're
sure,
saying is we want you to develop the skills of writing, but on the
yeah.
other hand, we can't ignore AI. You're going to have to use this in your life moving forward. Agree or
Yeah.
disagree?
No, I totally agree. And one of the things, and it was really interesting. This is my first book with Wiley, the publishing house, which is a real leader in business books. And I'm really candid in the book that I used AI to help me write the book, but more as an editor than a creator, right? So I would write and create, and then I would enter it into I used all of them. I used Perplexity and Chat GPT and Claude just to get the variety of responses. But I would ask it for suggestions of how could this be improved. And many times it made my writing better. It would give me an idea or whatever that would improve. And my goal is to be of service to the reader. So if AI can give me an idea that helps improve the work, I want to be open to that. But I don't want it to be AI's book. I want it to be my book. And so you find that, but I'm candid about it in the text of the book, is that I don't think AI is, I think it's more than a tool. I almost think it's it's your executive assistant. It is your partner. It is your editor. It can be your helper. But Larry, I think that's spot on in that we have to teach. I'm on the in-residence faculty at High Point University in High Point, North Carolina. And part of what I know the faculty there is dealing with is the same thing that you cited. We want our students to know AI and understand how to use it, but we also want them to have the critical thinking and critical writing skills, the life skills that will teach them in the future and guide them in the future. And for educators everywhere, that's going to be a very difficult balance, because it's going to be so easy for a student to say, I need a 500-word essay on insert topic here, and AI spits out a fabulous, fabulous essay.
I've used it before just as a helper, and what I
Yeah.
found is that there's something the AI engineers call hallucinations.
Yes,
That
yes.
means it just comes up with goofy responses. I asked it to rewrite a news release for me once, and it invented a quote from somebody not even mentioned in the news release. So that tells you how, I won't say which one
Yeah,
because I don't want to get sued, but it was one of the AI programs.
yeah.
Which
I had the same thing.
I mean, use it as a guide, but don't let it run your life, I think is.
Exactly. It gave me this beautiful example of this little company that had become so successful using the principles of that I'm talking about in the book. And so I thought, wow, that's really great. I need to find their website. There is no company. They made it up. It made it up. So
Uh,
all of us have to be careful that an AI expert told me that AI is programmed to please you. It is programmed to give you responses that help you and please you. And so, obviously, by what I had been asking it, the way it could please me and help me was to invent this company, and that's something that we have to guard against. That's why the human element, it just reinforces, Larry, what we're agreeing on here, and that is we can't eliminate the human element. That we have to have that as a part of all this going forward.
so let me bring Duncan back in here at this point.
Yeah, Scott, when you talk about, you know, distinction, you want to be distinctive. You want to make sure it's, I'm one of those that always looks for the best value, not
Sure.
necessarily the lowest price, but the best overall value, which would include the service. When you're talking to frontline employees, frontline managers, things of that nature, after you've had your discussions, maybe there's a Q&A, what do they about are some of the big things that are hindrances for them to be able to do that? Resources or training are always going to be a couple of the big ones.
Yeah.
But, one of the things that I've heard or seen is the attitude of customers out there, be it internal or external,
Mhm.
seem to be a little bit more either A, demanding or B, even surly anymore.
Yeah.
What have you found in this type of direction?
No, I think that's spot on. And I think one of the things that we have to help frontline folks realize is that part of the problem is I think a business teaches who the wrong competitor is. Here's my example. If I've got a dry cleaners in Fishers, Indiana, I look down the road and see another dry cleaners, and I think that's my competition. In a way it is, but not entirely. Because when a customer comes in your store, they come in with the baggage of they just had a bad time at the drive-through restaurant that they didn't put the right order in the bag. They come in with all this baggage of all of the bad experiences that they've had. Or if they go someplace nice, I go to a nice dinner. Um, I come in with all the experiences of all of the good hotels or the good, right? Customers blend all of these experiences together. Well, so many customers have had so many bad experiences, they come in, they expect that you're going to get it wrong. And that's the way they treat the employee is with a lot of skepticism, with a very critical approach. And we haven't talked enough with frontline people about that to understand how that customer is coming in and therefore how you need to communicate with them. On the flip side, and I'm doing a lot of work in the dermatology industry right now. Matter of fact, I'm leaving today to go to a dermatology conference in San Francisco. And one of the things that is happening in that business, like is happening in a lot of healthcare, is that private equity comes in and they buy the practice, and then they tell the doctor, now here's how many patients you have to see per day, and here's how much, and it's all a numbers game. So if the doctor stays a little longer and talks to you and connects with you, now they're behind in the number of patients that the new owner is requiring them to see, and we're making it harder and harder for people to create that personal connection because we make these decisions emotionally. If the doctor listens to me, I presume that's a good doctor, right?
Right.
That's part of how I judge it is do they listen to me? Do they understand why I'm there? Do they take the time? But doctors, on the other hand, I mean, so it's not just happening to frontline people at retail stores or automotive service centers or whatever. Doctors are experiencing this. Professionals are experiencing this. And therefore, the organizations that choose to be distinctive and not do it quite that way are the ones that are going to have greater customer loyalty. There's some incredible studies on it's so much easier to keep a customer than to go out and get a new one
Right.
because of the advertising expense. But I don't mean to give you my speech, but this is something I'm passionate about. When Larry and I were working together, when we left that radio station, that radio station's employment, if I would have picked up a microphone and took it with me out of the building, they would have called the cops, right? I have stolen something. But I can walk out of there with relationships with advertisers. I can walk out of there with relationships in the community. With what Larry did as a news professional, incredibly important. I could go across the street to another station and take those relationships, and the company doesn't do anything. And I promise you, those relationships are more valuable than the microphone. But yet companies don't do anything about that. They don't think about how important employees are, and what they can do to nurture that. So employee retention, how much does it cost to train somebody new to do the job? And
Exactly.
that's, we need retention of customers and retention of employees to enhance the profitability of any organization.
Let me give you a quick example with my wife, because my wife worked for 30 years for one company.
Yeah.
And she had a very good friend of hers. She worked out of the house a lot, but she also worked in the office. And she had a good friend of hers that sat next to her. Well, the company started downsizing, and they were going to close the office, and they were going to keep some people and not others. Well, her friend was riffed, or was they decided to no longer employ her. Well, they wanted to keep my wife, but she was very upset about the fact they didn't keep her friend, and they wanted to keep my wife on. However, she came in and said, "Well, I think I'm going to retire instead," and they were shocked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wanted her expertise. They wanted her to stay, but it was the way they treated her friend that
Yeah.
impacted her decision
Yeah.
not to stay with that company. So that's, I think, an example of how personal
Perfect
relationships
example.
are
Yeah.
ignored by the corporate culture, don't you think?
Absolutely, Larry. And I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence. If you look at when they come out with a list of best places to work, I'll give you an example. One of my clients that I work a lot with is Fairmont Hotels and the Fairmont Scottsdale Princess, as in particular. And they were ranked as the number one place to work in Arizona. They are also the most profitable of any Fairmont in the world. We call this a clue, right? I mean, you take care of your people. You make certain that Jack Miller, who's the CEO there, makes it a point to know every employee's name. I've walked with him through the property, and he's stopping housekeepers, asking about their kids, and he calls their kids by name. That means so much. And I'll give you another example. A few years back, I don't know, 4 or 5 years back, I get this email from this guy, and he said, "Your books have kind of been what's guided me to start my business. It's one of," and he mentioned in some other books, not just mine, but it was one of the books that guided me to help start my business. And I'd like to have you on my podcast. And if there's anything I can do for you, I want to do it. Signed, Jesse Cole, owner, Savannah Bananas.
Mm.
And so Jesse wrote the foreword for my book that's coming out in,
Nice.
in February. But Jesse's whole philosophy, I call it the ultimate customer experience. Jesse says fans first. And everything he does with his team is, how do we create this incredibly enjoyable experience for our fans? And when you put fans first, which he says then in turn also means I got to put players first, you know, the phenomenon that they have created, it is really all about how do we create something that fans not only want to come and be a part of to make it frictionless, but also that they'll tell their friends and they'll come back and see us the next time we're in town.
Scott, if you had pitched that idea of the Savannah Bananas to a corporate board, how many would have bidden on that? None.
None,
If you
none.
look
Yep.
at the history, and there's been a lot of great TV stories done on the
Yeah,
Savannah Bananas. In fact, The Indy Fuel hockey team plays here in Fishers now. One of their staff members I was working with, he's gone to work for them
Oh, no
because
kidding.
they
Yeah.
are growing and they're
Yeah.
starting their own league now.
Yeah.
But the thing that I always thought was that was a bottom up, just an idea somebody had on a small scale, built it into a big business that no big corporation would have ever taken on. So I think that says something. Duncan, we're kind of running out of time here. So anything you want to ask Scott?
No, I think that the example of the Savannah Bananas, basically to me it's an extension and an expansion of the Harlem Globetrotters.
Yeah.
Give the fan experience, make sure, and that's what I think is the bottom line. Is what you're saying is treat your employees right, make sure that they're valued and considered, so then they'll treat the customers right, internal, external, and it just makes it better for everybody. Is that pretty much it?
Yeah, and one of the things I've written is the key is to be somewhat derivative, right? Because there's a reason something else has been successful,
Yep.
but distinctive. How do you put your own spin on it? So for Jesse in the Savannah Bananas, when I was visiting him in Savannah, one of the things that he told me that I thought was fascinating was we didn't want to be the Harlem Globetrotters because they're scripted. We want to be entertaining like they are.
Gotcha.
But we want to play a real game. And so that's where the idea for the league has come from, is now that we've established what banana ball is with a set of rules, like if a fan in the stand catches a fly ball, the batter's out, right? I mean, the timing, the dancing, all that kind of stuff. Why couldn't we do that with more than one team and then have these teams play actual games and compensate players based on wins and batting averages and those kind of things, but also compensate them on the experience they create, right? So you're exactly right. They take the Harlem Globetrotters entertainment aspect, but then how do we make this competitive? That's their unique spin.
Yep.
And also, like it's real quick at Savannah, you think about if I want to take my family to a Pacers game, I know what the tickets cost, but now I've got to add parking, and now I've got to add, goodness only knows how much my kids want to eat and drink, and what do we do after all that kind of thing. So it's not just the ticket price; it's the total aspect that families look at, but maybe the team doesn't. When you buy a ticket in Savannah, now you can't do it at other stadiums because of union contracts and that, but when you buy a ticket for the Savannah Bananas, it includes your parking. It includes the taxes on the ticket. It includes all the drinks and food you can eat in the stadium. It is a total all-in ticket price. So mom and dad doesn't have to worry that there's going to be another $50, $70 on top of all this just to go to the game. But that comes from that thinking of fans first, customers first, the ultimate customer experience being distinctive. Now, could you sell that to a major league team, as you said, Larry? No, because they're looking at how do we wring every single penny out of, every single. But they don't look at that. That also might mean you go to one game a year instead of three. So it's thinking in that manner that helps create the kind of distinction that organizations are looking for. I got to put a plug in, by the way. The book they just put it up on Amazon for pre-order, and it's called Beyond Distinction: How leaders transform their organizations in an AI-driven marketplace.
Oh,
So,
you can pre-order the book now. Excellent.
yeah, they just put it up. I didn't realize they did it. I had a friend say, "Hey, I've ordered your book. How'd you do that?" Because I talk about communication. It would be nice to actually do what I talk about. So,
Well, one last question I've got.
sure.
What have you seen or experienced or heard about what do young people expect today? The Gen Zs, the millennials, do they have different expectations
Oh,
of
very much so.
distinction? What are those differences, you think?
Well, one in particular that jumps out at me is that they care about an organization's values, and they care about, how materials are sourced. They care about what the organization stands for. They want to go to work for a company that not only wants to stand out, but wants to stand for something. So that's different than folks of our generation, Larry, that, if the paycheck cleared and the boss didn't yell at you in the hallway, still employed. All right, good. They're looking for more meaningful kinds of work. One of the challenges that I see with that with generation Gen Z in particular, but some of the latter stage millennials. Um, you know, I use this example. My mom and dad never asked where I wanted to go on vacation. Dad said get in the truck. Yeah, that was about it, right?
Yeah.
Kids today now are asked, well, where would you like to go on vacation? And there's not as many families with kids tables at holidays anymore. The kids sets at the parents' day. My mom said children to be seen and not heard. That you don't hear that anymore. And so a lot of employers are telling me that when they hire younger people to come into work, they just assume they're going to be sitting at the table with the CEO. They just assume that their input is going to be valued, but yet they're managed by late stage baby boomers or Gen Xers. That's not the way that we've done it. And so there's this inherent conflict between, hey, you got to earn your stripes, and well, I didn't have to do that at home. Uh, I I got to. This blew me away. I was at a meeting. I was speaking at a meeting, and so they had a luncheon afterwards. I'm sitting at the luncheon. Turns out several of the people were involved in HR, and one guy said, "We have a new rule that if you call your parents during the job interview, the interview is over." Well, I laughed. I thought he was joking.
Mhm.
And he said,
No.
no, and he was with Procter and Gamble, and he said, we might be interviewing somebody to be the product manager for Western Iowa for Tide. And we're having a good interview, and now here's your compensation package. And they pull out their iPhone and call mom or dad to
Yep.
negotiate the compensation package. And he said, if you got to have mom or dad do the compensation package, how are you going to run Tide for Western Iowa
Exactly.
by yourself, right? So he said these are no longer helicopter parents. They're Black Hawk Down parents. Man, they've gotten out of the helicopter and they're straight. And it's fascinating to me the things that we often do, and I, as a step parent, I've been guilty of it, is trying to make it so easy for my stepsons that sometimes, and they're in their 30s now, but sometimes I didn't allow them to suffer the defeats that we suffered that also, made us a little bit stronger in our professional careers. So it's just fascinating, the whole psychology of, what younger people are looking for in their jobs and in their careers. And I always thought it was a negative to change jobs. I wanted to show some length in my resume. Now, particularly in tech, they look at your resume, and if you've been there 2 years, what's wrong with you? Yeah,
Yep.
it's just a total reversal. So, uh, and there's the challenge that those of us that are a little old have, and that is just because it's different doesn't make it wrong, right?
I got one last question for you here, and because you're in Fort Wayne now for family
Yeah,
reasons, I'm sure, but you
yeah,
generally live in Las Vegas now.
yeah,
What's happening in Las Vegas? You talk about distinction. I mean, a lot of observers who've watched what's been happening there business-wise are saying that Las Vegas has sort of priced the middle class out. They're almost like
yeah.
they want the big spenders and they're crowding out people who are not. And there are fewer people in Vegas, yet the corporations are still making money. So I'm just curious, where do you think Las Vegas is going? People are making all sorts of predictions. As somebody who lives there and sees it firsthand, what are your thoughts?
It's hitting the wall, and it gets back to what we talked about, Larry, about price. About wringing every cent possible out of your customer. Eventually breeds customer resentment. I've got friends who live in Scottsdale that went up to see the Eagles at the Sphere last weekend, and they got a hotel room at the Venetian for about $200, which on a weekend they thought was fabulous. But they check out, and the resort fee was $150.
Oh, oh,
$75 a
oh,
night, and
ow.
so they think, oh, it's a $200 room. No, it's really a 275. It's almost $300 room. By the time then you add taxes, which are extremely high in Vegas on rooms, and they've just taxed and priced the out of the market. As a local, one of the things that I liked was you always got free valet parking. I
Exactly.
remember when
Yep.
valet parking was free for everybody, but then at Caesars you could show up, show them your Nevada driver's license, and your parking was free. It's $50 to park there now. So you've dropped $50. It's $40 if you want to self-park. You've dropped 40 or $50 just to park. And at the end of the day, we in Indiana, we can go to Anderson or
Yeah,
they're
Shelbyville. Yeah.
if Shelbyville, or near Cincinnati, right? I mean, on the Indiana side, there's places we can go and gamble and have a good time at really pretty nice facilities. So in the old days, I got to tell you a quick story. I was speaking for Caesars, and at that time, the CEO of Caesars was a guy named Gary Loveman. He had been a consultant, then they turned and hired him as CEO. And he was one of the first to bring this strategic pricing like the airlines do. He brought it to Caesars in that. So he comes up to me after my speech and he says, "So you're from Indiana?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, I'm from Indianapolis." I said, "I didn't know that." He said, "Yeah, I grew up at 38th and Shadeland."
Oh,
He said, "What does that tell you?" I said, "It tells me you didn't grow up rich." It's one thing it tells
that's
me,
my
right?
old. That's pretty close to my old neighborhood.
Yeah, I know, Larry. That's part of why I wanted to say it. Well, anyway, one of the things he said is, he said, "I see," and I mean, this was 10 years ago. He said, "I see a real bad change for Vegas." He said, "One of the things I wanted to do is not focus as much on the high roller, focus more on slot machines, because I know," it's in the industry, it's called coin in. So if $100 goes in, I'm going to keep $3. My goal is to get more people putting in $100, because a whale can come in and risk $1 million and we lose, and we have lost $1 million like that. And it's unpredictable because it's gambling. We have an advantage, but we don't have an assurance. He said, "We need to be more customer focused. How do we get more customers putting more money in slot machines? Because we know exactly the percentage that we're going to make." When he left and retired, now other folks have come in, and it's like, how do we get more money from the restaurants? How do we get more? My buddy had an old fashioned at a bar, and it was $32 for the
Oh,
drink.
oh,
So,
oh.
I mean, they have absolutely thought our customers will spend anything. And if there's one thing I think that tears companies down, the first thing is arrogance.
The last time Jane and I went to Vegas, we decided to splurge and went to see O. I don't know why. We just decided to do that, the big Cirque du Soleil show. But the night before, we went to see a Motown show across the street for like 1/10 of the cost.
Yeah.
I mean, O was fine. It was elaborate and all that, but the Motown show was better. I mean,
Okay. Yeah.
it's almost like Duncan. Anything last you want to say to Scott before we wrap this up?
Nope, just really appreciate you taking the time to come on, and
Oh, my
I
pleasure.
hope that the audience has been as illuminated as Larry and I have with
Oh, it's very
some of your
kind.
great points.
I appreciate it. It's Larry. Thank you too, as well, Duncan. Thank you. But Larry, after our years of working together, WCSI in Columbus, that was a great time with great people, and it's great. Our friendship has continued throughout the
Yeah,
years.
I'm glad I've been able to, connect every now and then. You're busy and so am I, but I'm always happy to make that connection. When I saw you at the last reunion,
Yeah.
I thought about you when Duncan and I started this podcast. So, your new book is coming out. It'll be in February. You can pre-order it now online. Scott McKain is the speaker that has spoken around the world on the whole idea of customer distinction. And Duncan, thank you for being with us. And Scott, thanks. Well, maybe you can join us again sometime. We'd love to have you back.
Oh, anytime. I'd love to come back. Thank you.
We have one ask for you as the audience. Like and subscribe to this podcast. We appreciate it. Duncan and Larry will be back soon with another episode. In the meantime, this is Unscripted.